Good evening, colleagues, students. Please stand when the procession enters. You may be seated. Good evening to the Registrar, Deans, and Deputy Deans of Faculties, distinguished guests, Prof. Govender's family, colleagues and students. It's a very good sign that such large numbers of colleagues and students have come from the Faculty of Education to support Professor Govender. An inaugural address is a very special moment in the academic trajectory of a professor. It also marks a very significant milestone, a form of rite of passage, where a newly appointed full professor is formally recognized and a public platform is provided for them to share their scholarly achievements to the university community. We wish Professor Govender well as he owns this moment. I call upon the Registrar, Dr. Nita Lawton-Misra, to welcome you.
Good evening, colleagues, students, friends, and family of Professor Govender. On behalf of the Rector and Vice-Chancellor, Professor Balfour, it gives me great pleasure on this wonderfully warm spring day to welcome you to what promises to be a very thought-provoking lecture. I think among us this evening are some who are great at maths, like Professor Holgate, who may have an innate love for and understanding of it, and then there may be others like me, who are still trying to find X. Perhaps tonight's the night we will finally find it. This evening we have gathered to celebrate Professor Govender and his achievement of gaining the recognition of a full professor. As Prof. Chetty has said, an inaugural lecture is a milestone in the life and journey of academics. It signals that one is truly an expert in what one professes. And it provides an opportunity for the professor to share their expertise and future vision for their field. It is a formal acknowledgement of academic achievement and a public showcase of pioneering research. It is also meant to allow the professor time to reflect on their career and to inspire future contributions to the field. Professor Govender is an internationally recognized scholar in mathematics education. And I'm certain that he has and continues to inspire many who follow in his footsteps. I was quite intrigued by the topic when we received it. And I'm not yet sure why Prof. Govender selected, and I hope I get this word right, the Syzygium as an analogy for his lecture. And I'm sure we will gain that insight as the evening progresses. But my research into this particular plant revealed the following, and I quote, "The native Australian Syzygium, more popularly known as lily-pilly, is a superb hedging and screening plant in all situations and very popular with gardeners. Syzygiums are easygoing regarding climate, rainfall, and soil type. The fruit, the seed, and the ash of the leaves have a very long history for use for various medicinal, that is, healing purposes," unquote. Anyone who has worked with Professor Govender will agree that words such as easygoing, healing, very popular, and superb in all situations are apt descriptions of Prof. Govender himself. So with that, we look forward to gaining many wonderful insights from Prof. Govender's lecture this evening and congratulate him in advance on this incredible achievement. May this lecture be the catalyst for creativity, criticality, and self-directed learning. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nita Lawton-Misra. Colleagues, it's so important to have active education, so I'd like you to please stand so we could sing the national anthem. Thank you. You may be seated. I now call upon Professor Ruwar Marman, the Deputy Dean of Research and Postgraduate Studies in the Faculty of Education, to introduce Professor Govender.
Thank you, Prof. Chetty. Good afternoon, everybody. I only heard the registrar greeting back. Good afternoon, everybody. Yes, what a joyous occasion for the Govender family, the Govender clan. A man from the kingdom, a friend, an activist, an academic leader, an internationally recognized scholar, and the Dean of the Faculty of Education. at the University of the Western Cape. I have two choices. I can either read the abstract for you, which you have read already, or I can make up my own synonyms for that difficult word. But I'm going to stick to Prof. Govender's waterberry tree. So in an era where the ability to think critically, flexibly, and independently is as important as content knowledge, how do we prepare future mathematics teachers to rise to this challenge? This inaugural lecture draws on a compelling metaphor, the waterberry tree, to explore how real-world mathematical modeling tasks can nurture creative and self-directed learning in pre-service mathematics teachers, using deceptively simple yet cognitively rich problems, like estimating the height of a tree, counting the number of leaves on a tree. This research illuminates how context-rich, open-ended tasks stimulate deeper understanding, adaptive reasoning, and the development of modeling competencies, illuminating engaging pedagogies nested in a constructivist paradigm. This lecture, therefore, will exemplify how a mathematical project can move beyond textbook exercises to become a pedagogical growing tree, rooted in authentic inquiry, branching into multiple perspectives and cultivating the fruits of creative and critical engagement. Me not understanding mathematics yet, so I'm with Registrar. It's safer to read the abstract as is. But let me go into the biography of Prof. Govender. Prof. Govender joined the University of the Western Cape in 2008, 1st of June, and made big strides immediately in the Faculty of Education and in the institution. Prof. Govender is a recognized leader in the University of the Western Cape community. He has transcended all the different levels of academic leadership in our institution, and we're very proud to call him the Dean of our faculty now for 6 years, including his acting terms. Prof. Govender holds a PhD in mathematics education, a BSc honors in mathematics, and a PG Dip in teaching and learning in higher education cum laude, reflecting his strong grounding in both subject content and pedagogical innovation. Just having a thought that when I was a high school teacher in Port Elizabeth, he was already a teacher in the same vicinity, and maybe I should have joined your school and sit in your mathematics class in order to master mathematics. With over 40 years of experience in teaching, research, and academic leadership, he is known for his transformative and inclusive approach to education. His research focuses on geometry, reasoning and proof, mathematical modeling, and the integration of emerging technologies, such as artificial intelligence, augmented reality, and virtual reality, into mathematics education and teacher training. In 2022, Prof. Govender was admitted as a Teaching Advancement at Universities Fellow, recognizing his scholarly leadership in teaching and learning. He has published widely in peer-reviewed journals, books, and technical reports, and currently serves as editor-in-chief of Pythagoras, a DHET-accredited journal, and as the series editor for UWC's AOSIS book series. Prof. Govender also occupied the positions of program coordinator in our faculty, of head of department for the School of Science and Mathematics Education, as deputy dean teaching and learning, and obviously now as dean. It is my pleasure, ladies and gentlemen, to call to the podium Professor Rajendran Govender to deliver his inaugural lecture as full professor.
Good evening, colleagues and my peers in the mathematics community, as well as our students and other special guests, and more importantly, my wife, my son, and my daughter. I think it's the first time they are in a room where I'm presenting a lecture. Colleagues, I think the suspense is in the title. Thanks, Registrar and Prof. Maruman. You will see why later on I kind of zoned in on the title. But let me start looking at who I am and where I come from. 1968 and 1969, I did go to nursery school. So if you're talking about ECD, I did go through that phase. And I went to primary school, and it was, the name of the school was St. Mary's, and it was a school supported by the nuns, so during lunch breaks you'll get some nice sandwiches, and we will always have healthy food at school. And then in 1978 I went to high school. I think you remember those years, the 1970s, it's quite a volatile moment, quite a lot of activity happening around the government and the way they were treating us. But anyway, in grade 11, I was suspended. I was very disciplined in school. I was well behaved in school, but I was suspended. And this was part of the boycotts, the 1980 boycotts. And then eventually in 1980, I was offered an apprenticeship at ESCOM, but my dad said, no, you can't go there. So my peer went, and he completed his career there as an engineer. So maybe I should have solved some of the ESCOM problems if I was there. But in 1981, on April Fool's Day, I was expelled from school. And I'll share more about that with you. In 1982, I was offered a teacher qualification, a teacher opportunity to study at the university. And then I thought I'd share this with you. Readmission of an expelled pupil. I have to advise you that the application for readmission of your child award for the current school year has been unsuccessful. You or she may, however, apply in January 1982 to the Director of Indian Education for permission to be submitted to the school during this year. As a special concession, though, you or she may register with the department to enter for the 1981 Senior Certificate examination as a private candidate before 15th of August, and the letter was dated the 21st of July. And I got expelled in schools. But there was court cases in between, and that's why we got the letter. But the rider here, it was not very clear. So when we got to the department to register as private candidates, all of my peers in my class and in the school, the department told us, listen, for English and Afrikaans and physical science and biology, you'll get 0 out of 80 for the practicals part. So which means out of 400, you must get 160, which means I must get 160 out of 320 to pass, you know. So all my peers decided to go back to school the next year. But I remained behind and said, I will try, just for the experience. And I did try. And when I tried, I then got a telegram somewhere in September, can you appear for orals in English and Afrikaans and biology and physical science? I went and I participated. At the end of the year, when the results were announced for the examination, my name was not in the paper. So it's understood that if your name is not in the paper, you failed. You failed. But a week went by, and I didn't get my result sheet. You should get your result sheet, even if you failed. Then I asked my dad, let's go to the department. And we went to the department, and the innocent clerk in the department didn't know who I was. And he checked in the system, and he printed out the certificate and said, you got a metric exemption? Here is it. And immediately the very same afternoon, because the department was linked to the university, I got a call for an interview for a teacher qualification. And I went to the interview, and they asked me, why were you wrote as a private candidate? I said, you should know the reasons. And then they said, we're quite happy about your maths result, because that was my best result in my sheet, in fact. We want to give you an opportunity to do teacher education in mathematics and physical science, and we'll give you a bursary. Do you want it? I said, yes. And that's how I became a teacher. So during those years, I want to say I'm very grateful to my late parents who sacrificed tirelessly to provide for my education. From my earliest school days to university, they supported every step of my journey. The love, guidance, and sacrifices shaped the teacher and person I am today. But I moved on to become a college lecturer and a subject advisor, and a lecturer in mathematics, and a senior lecturer, an associate professor, and dean, etc. But during this time, my loving and prayerful wife has been the greatest blessing and strength since 1988. For 36 years, she has encouraged, supported, and stood behind me through every season of my life. Her unwavering faith, love, and sacrifices continued to inspire and sustain me each day. My son, Trevelyan, and my daughter, Shannon, continue to inspire me every day with their passion, determination, and resilience. The love and belief in me remind me why I strive for excellence in all I do. Today, they are my greatest source of pride and motivation as I stand before you. So, the metaphor, the Syzygium tree. If you look at the tree, Registrar, the roots of the tree underpin the learning theories that guides my philosophy to learning and teaching and research. It's constructivism theory, activist theory, and the problem-based learning theory, and I'll expand more about that. But the academic growth path of the tree is largely determined by the support I had from my peers, my parents, my family, the community, and all the engagement with all societies, both professional and administrative societies as well. But let me tell you what the roots represent. The roots represent the learning theories grounding my teaching and research, which explain constructivism, activity theory, and problem-based learning. The branches represent the diversity of my scholarly interests, which is geometry, reasoning, proof, technology-enhanced learning, problem-based learning, mathematical modeling, and self-direct learning, as well as engaging pedagogies and assessment practices and meaningful learning. And obviously the fruits are the ones that contributed to the institutional and national policies, my input into influencing teacher education practice, shaping how students learn, and also empowering new generation scholars. With regard to the philosophical stance in terms of constructivist learning, I believe that knowledge is co-constructed through active engagement, inquiry, and reflection. And activity theory, learning occurs within the social mediated environments where tools, technology, and collaboration shapes cognition, and obviously problem-based learning. But I think my true academic identity is defined by four cornerstones. The one is geometry, reasoning, and proof. That is what much of my work on research and teaching and love for has been around. And then problem solving and mathematical modeling, technology-enhanced learning. But one of the important things I find for me is that assessment drives learning. And it's about fostering learners' capacity to become autonomous, self-directed learners, all underpinned by the belief that assessment drives learning. And this is what, for me, is mathematical thinking. There are 8 important constructs: the conceptual understanding, logical and deductive reasoning, problem solving and modeling, conjecturing and generalizing, creative and critical thinking, representational fluency, and metacognition and self-regulation, persistence and productive disposition. So I hope my lecture throughout will try to exemplify this key aspects of mathematical thinking. But one of the important things that has always been foregrounding the work I've been doing is George Polya, who is a psychologist, by the way, and a mathematician. And I always latch on to his stages of problem solving, looking at the problem and then trying to understand the problem and making a plan and carrying out the plan and looking back. And I want to zone in on the step understanding the problem. It is a crux. You can know all the mathematics, you can have the entire toolbox of mathematics, but unless you understand the problem, you wouldn't know which tool to use, which procedure to use, which mathematics to invoke. So reading and understanding is fundamentally important. And my position on this matter is that we as teacher educators and teachers in schools must insist on developing practices and processes to ensure that we develop the reading capacity and competency of all of us, including the learners in the classroom. Just reflecting back, and this is where parents play a big role, reflecting back to myself, when both my son and daughter was quite young, I should ask them to read a book, and that's the way of earning the pocket money, and then they will make a list of the books they read. And then every Friday I get this big list of books, but I have to pay them because that was a promise. Eventually one day I said, no, I don't want you to want the name of the books you read. I want you to write what you read. And that's how I managed to reduce the amount of pocket money to them. So making a plan is looking at, what strategies do we use? How do we go about solving this problem? And then carrying on the plan is actually really doing the mathematics. And the most important part is looking back to see whether your solution makes sense or not, or whether it is useful, or must we change it, etc. And then nested in that is the modeling process, where you give them the Syzygium tree, and they need to understand how to calculate the height of the tree and what it means, and represent it through a real model, and then try to bring in the mathematics and the variables and mathematize and create a mathematics model, and then use that model to see how the mathematics will work and how to use the mathematics to solve the problem, and then look at it and interpret what the answer means, and then validate the solution to see if it makes sense. The important thing about creative thinking is that it's the ability to generate original, flexible, and valuable ideas by exploring multiple perspectives. And William indicates that fluency, flexibility, originality, elaboration, risk-taking, complexity, curiosity, and imagination are the key dimensions of that. But for me, it's about navigating complex problems innovatively, developing multiple solution paths. That's where the creativity lies, okay? And some of the strategies to foster creative thinking in mathematics is you design open-ended tasks, you integrate inquiry and project-based learning, apply cognitive apprenticeship approaches, leverage technology and embody design, establish reflective practices, and promote risk-taking and curiosity. And obviously critical thinking, all nested within Bloom's taxonomy, and looking at how the various levels play a role in ultimately creating new ideas and looking at the higher order thinking skills. Now comes what I call Dr. Samuel Lundy, rhizomatic assessment principles. We have assessment for learning, assessment of learning, assessment as learning. But I think for me, assessment, it values interconnections between ideas, context, and discipline, and assess the process knowledge building as much as the final products. And it's about developing growth, exploration, and developing adaptable learners, adaptable citizens. Adaptability is an important construct for teacher education, because we see that quite often new ideas come into teacher education, new material come into teaching. How do we read? How do we understand what that means? So adaptability is an important reason, and that is a serious gap in initial teacher education, which I think we need to address. And then we're looking at mathematical project, which may be used to provide students to apply mathematical knowledge in the daily lives. And once again, it gives you opportunity for creativity and authentic assessment, which is invaluable in my area of work when I was teaching largely mathematics at the university. Now here's the tree problem, and that's the Waterbury tree, Rowan and Registrar. It's, if you want to see it, it's there. It's growing all over the university. So whenever you walk past the Waterbury tree, you can think about it. Now, this is the activity I've given my method class students, the students who were senior phase teachers, becoming senior phase teachers. They would have done maths literacy, some of them sitting in the class done maths literacy, and some would have done mathematics, so they're all sitting in the same class. Some would have done language and mathematics as their specialization in university, Some would have done natural science and mathematics within the university. So you have a different spread of students sitting in the classroom. And this was a third year class, and I was wondering, how would I give an assessment that's accessible, inclusive, but at the same time enable them to succeed and reach the outcomes, but also looking at the NQF level in terms of complexity, in terms of the thinking, you know. And so I've given them this question to do as a project. And that was my modeling rubric 3 project. I don't want to go through the details of it. You're welcome to read it. It's on the website. And that's the criteria and the flow. So important to have an analytic rubric that clearly indicates to students what are the expectations that I need, okay? So here is the first group that went through the solution. And I put the answer up. This is the building next to that. And if you look there, let me stand here. You can see that's a building that's 1.4 meters. They counted the bricks, and then there's 0.2 meters, 0.4, and they continue like that. And they got the height of that building, which is that one there. You know? And then what they did was they took a picture of the building. And they said, okay, now this is 2.7 meter, and then they looked at, okay, the tree goes from there to there. What is this distance here on scale? 1.7. So they managed to have those particular values, and then they used the proportional reasoning and ratio and proportion and got the answer, okay? So that was one method. Students were able to do it, and they accomplished and found the solution. And they then looked at the answer and said, does it make sense? Yes, of course, the top one must be smaller than the bottom one. Yeah? So visually, so it's okay. You know, you've got different groups of students in your class. Okay. So now there's group 2, and then they try to explain what they understand by the problem. The third bullet, the tree branches are making the branch at the highest point, not an angle, it is relative to the ground. However, we assume that it is. It's so important. The assumptions is important, because modeling does not always give you the correct answer, you understand? It gives you an approximate answer. So your assumptions is fundamentally important. If your assumptions are different, you'll get a different answer. So here is the student. He's standing next to the waterberry tree, the Syzygium. He takes a picture, and he's using that as a unit of measure. And he places himself against the photo, and he finds that 7 3/4 of the photo fits in. And therefore, I'm 1.65, and that's why 7 3/4 times gives me my 12.79 meters. Okay? I mean, it's a group effort. Okay? And here comes another student using the eye level and the angle of elevation, looking at the tree. The Syzygium tree, and gets that, and then use trigonometry, tan theta equal to that, gets the height of the tree, but remember the calculation 30.93 adds a plus 1.51 because she's standing, because the angle, the eye level is there, you understand? You still have to add the height. So that's thinking, isn't it? So you've seen 3 different answers, moving from simple to slightly more, moving from primary school maths to high school maths. So this is the important part, looking back. Both methods gave different answers. Method 1 was the most accurate method, therefore we will stick to this answer. They reflected on both the answers. The method 2 used trigonometry may not be accurate, as the exact angle could not be obtained. And also when looking at the height of the surrounding buildings, which is approximately the height of the tree, we noticed that the tree was close to the height of the surrounding buildings, whose height is 13 meters. And in reality, calculating heights of objects, you also do it by comparison with other objects, isn't it? And that's what they were doing here. So some theory, cooperative learning is an instructional strategy where learners work collaboratively in structured groups to achieve shared learning goals while supporting one another, understanding. And some of the benefits for mathematical thinking, mathematical learning is it develops critical thinking and reasoning through active discussion, enhances problem-solving skills by sharing diverse strategies, and improves motivation and reduces math anxiety via peer support. It promotes inclusive learning by valuing multiple perspectives. And this is what was actually happening in those groups, okay? And then there is another group using the clinometer, and they actually designed a clinometer. They make some assumptions. And you can see them implementing the steps in terms of measuring and the angle of elevation via the clinometer and representing the situations. Now they draw the model at the bottom. Can you see that? A mathematical model of the situation. I didn't tell them to do that. And then use the trig ratio again and get the height. I was not interested in the answer. I was interested in how they collaborate, how they exchange ideas, how they argue. Okay? So this group also use the clinometer to an extent, but use it slightly differently. And they make their assumptions, etc. This was a group of girls, or female students. And they try to understand we must measure from the tip to the base of the tree. Our assumption is the tree stands upright at a perpendicular angle to the ground. So that's one assumption. That all trees are not necessarily upright, but in order to do this, they use this. And you can use the surrounding buildings to deduce the minimum height of the tree. I think I brought a resource here. I was a teacher. So basically, they're using the principle of the right angle triangle, which is isosceles by nature. This side is equal to that side. So if I know this distance, then I will know that distance. Okay? And so what this group is saying, that if I stand in the tree here, I will move, bend an angle of 45 degrees, right? And look through my legs until I see the top of the tree, understand? And then I stop. If I got this distance, then I got the height of the tree, understand? And so that's what they were using. They're using the principle. And they continued, here's what they were doing, you see. I published this in an international book called The Bending Principle. So when walking from the tree, bending forward at regular intervals, stopping at the point when the top of the tree can be seen, when measuring the horizontal distance from the tree to the point at which the top of the tree can be seen when bending forward, the distance d would be measured with the intervals of 450. So they're defining the intervals. So we were then able to get 4 measurements of 450, with the last measurement being 128, and then obviously they used the mathematics and got 19.28. And therefore the height is 19.28. This means the height of the tree is 19.28. And you can see them involved in groups. They really engage in the work. You know. The tree was in fact 19.28 tall. Considering the surrounding, the buildings close by, with an average single-story building being roughly 3 meters, we estimated the height of the adjacent building to be about 14 meters, as it seems to have no more than 4 floors. Hence, we reject the answer of 19.28. Their own self-reflection and engagement. We realized that the point at which the bending process was happening needed to be a true 45 degrees. So they are doubting that they were bending at 45 degrees. They realized where the challenge could be. And therefore, we followed the same steps, but paid attention to the angle in which it should, when the tree top could be seen. And we used the same interval. And then they repeated the step. And now they have an answer of 12.8. The height of the tree is approximately equal to 13 meters. So the importance of looking back, they were looking back. It deepens conceptual understanding. It validates and refines the model. Develops transferable problem-solving skills. It promotes self-directed learning and enhances mathematical communication. You can read more about that in my paper. This group used the similar principle, but instead of bending, they held the thing at eye level, you understand? The same principle, but they did it upright. Instead of bending, they did it upright, okay? And they was looking to see whether they can see the top of the tree. But once again, they must add the height at the end. And they did the same principle, and that's the solution they have. That's another group. Okay. So self-directed learning involves learners or students taking initiative and responsibility of their own learning, and this includes diagnosing the learning needs, setting goals, selecting resources and strategies, monitoring progress, and evaluating outcomes, with facilities supporting rather than dictating the process. This is where I got the name from, Professor Anita. This is where I got the name from. This group of students did research. They didn't use ChatGPT, but they used some Google. They used. The biological name of the tree is Syzygium caudatum, also known as the waterberry tree. The waterberry tree is evergreen and water-loving tree. The tree grows to the height of 8 to 15 meters. And you can see by coincidence, the answers that we are getting earlier on lies in that range. This tree is often found near streams or forest margins or in swampy spots. So probably this was a swampy area because around the entire university, this tree is growing. The leaves are elliptic to circular. That's important. You'll see why later. Bluish green on top and paler green below. So this is some biology coming in here, isn't it? Multidisciplinary work. Okay? Now they represent the situation. They represented the situation. That's an important skill, reading and understanding. And they're saying that's the community analysis sciences building. And I was wondering, is that true? But it is. And then we have the library, and they put the tree. And then they said, okay, look at them. I didn't tell them to read a map. I didn't even tell them to get a map. They took the map and read. I think I want to read what they did. This is a map of the UWC campus, but I want to focus on Central and North Campus in order to illustrate what needed to be done in order to obtain the height of the tree. We started the building 10, administration. We started our interrogation at admin, and they knew nothing about the height of the building, so they sent us to B block finance department. The problem was that B block has no finance department, so instead of going back to admin, we went to the community health science building to inquire about the building site. They had no record of the blueprints of the building specs, so I was forced to go back to admin. After standing in the long administration queue, they sent us to the EMS building where I consulted somebody known, we knew somebody who might know. He then sent us to a man named Marcus who works in the risk and health management department. He knew nothing about that specific building, so he sent me to the project's office. Persistence of the students to find an answer to this problem. We ended up at the project's office. We spoke to Mr. Nigel Britz, the project and contracting coordinator for UWC. He oversees and holds the blueprints of all the buildings. He shared with us an old plan of the old physics building, better known as CHS. And there's the plan. I did not want to teach the students about reading a plan. But what is the importance of this activity? That they set their own goal, which is true to self-directed learning, and they accomplish it. But reading the plan is not so easy. You need to know what the scale is, what it means, what is the relationship in terms of just 2D drawing to the 3D that you're going to see in reality. And they read the 13,500 to be 13.5 meters and many other things. And then they got the height of the tree. So when you find building plan and read it to determine the height of a building, you develop a range of cognitive, mathematical, spatial, and problem-solving skills. First one is mathematical and analytical skills, spatial visualization and geometric reasoning, information literacy and critical thinking, problem-solving and decision-making skills, and communication and collaboration skills. This is a nice paper that I'm writing on this one. Now, facilitating SDL in maths education classrooms. How do you do that? You must shift the teacher role to mentor or facilitator, teach goal setting, self-assessment and reflection, use cognitive apprenticeship methods, embed active constructive student-centered learning, and provide structured opportunities for reflection. Enhance metacognitive instruction, use technology, think, pair, share in maths, and peer-assisted SDL. I thought this student here came out of a scientific answer using physical science. It says an object in here can move both up and sideways. For the purpose of this class, we assume that no sideways motion. Very strict, very strict. Whether that really happens, but it's part of modeling, you know. Right? This is how I want to make my assumptions, and you go by my assumptions, right? Direction of gravity is negative. Stone thrown directly upwards and it lands in throw's end on return. That's another assumption. Right? For each throw, we assume the ball reaches the top of the tree. That's also another assumption. So you can get various answers depending on the assumptions. Right? And then he goes and use velocity. That was not my topic. You can see how many topics I covered. keep firmly in mind that the initial velocity with respect to y is not going to remain constant, but that the velocity with respect to x will. During the time the ball takes to rise vertically, stop vertically and fall vertically back to the ground, the ball moves horizontally with constant velocity. We must determine just how long that time of the flight is. And he continues. And he says, based on the assumption that downward motion is negative, we can calculate the maximum height directly from the kinematic equation. And he proceeds, and he gives a reason why the velocity with respect to x is 0, and why he's using that equation. And he says, notice the y velocity for the falling part of the trajectory is 0, reducing the equation to that. Now he's got y equal to minus r. Systematic, logical, and then he gets the answer, saying since time was used was half time of flight t, since the displacement from the top of the tree to the ground is given by y, which is minus that, our interpretation of the height of the tree is 12.93 meters. Now you look at this answer compared to the very first answer we started on. In a class that has got varying levels of students, isn't it? But they all can do the problem and find an answer. That's the most important thing. So there's different ways of that. And the shadow method, David, many of them use the shadow method, you know. What is the shadow of the tree and what is the shadow of you, and using ratio and proportion, okay? There was another group of students who said on a skateboard, I will put a mirror on the skateboard and move the skateboard along the path until I see in the mirror the top of the tree and I'll stop. Problem done, solved. They're enjoying themselves, okay? So there's a range of strategies which you have seen, which I summarized for you. So this problem brought a range of different answers, enabling students to invoke different kinds of mathematics, and also the collaboration and the communication, doing research, etc. The importance of developing creative thinking and competence in pre-service mathematics teachers, obviously it's part of the 21st century, and when you solve big problems, you engage with multi-stakeholders, and they have demonstrated this principle. It enables innovative teaching and curriculum design, fosters deep mathematical reasoning and understanding, builds confidence in adopting creative pedagogies, and shapes teachers who model creativity for the students. This is how many leaves on the tree was the most interesting problem for me. Obviously, the students did research on the name of the tree and what it is and the shape of the leaves, etc. So we are asked to calculate the amount of leaves on the tree. At first glance, one may make an exaggerated assumption and claim that there may be 1 million or so leaves on the tree. Because it would be insane for someone to individually count all the leaves on the tree, some people did, I must say. They counted on one branch and said, okay, how many branches? And they drew the branches, etc. Some of them did that. We needed to think of the solution to find an approximate amount of leaves on the tree. As a result, we consulted Google, ChatGPT. But this is where it's important that using ChatGPT diligently, we should support, change the policy. So once we searched how to calculate the approximate amount of leaves on a tree, we came about a bit of information on a forester, Dr. Kim Koder at One Health School of Forestry and Natural Resources. Here, Dr. Koder states a breakdown on how to find the leaves. And this is what we call adaptive reasoning, you understand? Which Gettner talks about structure mapping theory, okay? It's a psychological theory that involves analogical reasoning, one-to-one mapping. And so he gives a recipe of how to find the number of leaves on the tree. Says that very rough estimate can be gotten by measuring the area in square feet beneath the crown of a tree and multiplying by 4. This gives you the estimated total surface area of the tree in square feet. Next, estimate how many individual leaves it would take to cover 1 square foot. Multiply that result with the total leaf surface, which gives you an approximation of the number of leaves on that tree. So they carry out the plan, and you can see them. First, you need to work out the area beneath the crown of the tree. So they're looking at the tree at the top and say, okay, I need this and I need that. And so that's the picture of the crown of the tree on the right-hand side, 12.7 by 12. I say, because we follow the metric system in South Africa, we assume the formula will still work despite using the meters instead of feet. And that's an important skill, you see. That's what you call intelligent copying. No, it's analogical reasoning. It's analogical reasoning. Transfer of information using one-to-one mapping. As seen in the picture on the right, we worked out the length and the breadth beneath the crown of the tree. Some of the tree has been left out of the box. This is to account for the spaces in between the branches of the tree. And then they get the area of that space, which is 152.4, And then we multiply it by 4 to get the total leaf area. And they got the total leaf area using the formula. Interesting. Next, we have to calculate how many individual leaves would cover 1 square meter. Depicted in the picture, there is a row of 27 leaves lengthwise and a row going down 12 leaves. So what they did was they tried to work out how many leaves in a square meter. We used dead leaves that were lying beneath the tree. We did this to avoid damaging the tree, but also we had already picked fresh leaves to work on the mass of the tree. We used the area formula again to work on how many leaves would fill a square meter, and we got that answer. So the 24 leaves per square meter, we now multiply the result by the leaf surface area to get an approximation of the amount of leaves, and they do that. And they get their answer, the 197510. And so they say the answer is 197511. So they're using a recipe, put it easily, and followed it diligently and got an answer. But looking back, just to say that the structure mapping theory is base domain, moving to target domain, and inferred structure aspects and known structure aspects. So I write a nice paper on this, on analytical reasoning structure mapping theory. But moving on to this, looking back, we assume that all plants in nature fall part of the Fibonacci sequence. So the amount of branches a tree has and the ways the leaves grow on these branches, as well as the amount of petals on the flower, etc. The picture that shows the first few 300 numbers of the sequence. The 27th number in the sequence is 196418. The next being 31781. So now they're saying, look at the answer, 197511 is not a bad estimation of a comparison because it's quite close to 196418. And that's looking back to see if my answer makes sense, Will it hold water? Using the Fibonacci sequence. And Dr. Kim Coda's response, how many leaves does a tree have? Allows us to further assume that the answer we arrive at may just be plausible. And yet this is what Tim Coda says. It depends on the tree species and age, but a mature healthy tree can have 200,000 leaves. So that's looking back. So importance of developing self-directed learning competency in pre-service mathematics teachers. It promotes lifelong learning and professional agency, prepares teachers to foster self-directed learning in the future classrooms, builds critical thinking, creativity, and adaptability, and supports metacognitive and self-regulated skills, and aligns with modern educational principles. I want to, what is the mass of the leaves? I think this is quite easy, but the important thing is that they take a sample of 20 different leaf sizes, and they work on the average sample, average weight of one leaf, going through that process and using the scale, etc. And then eventually you can see the calculations of the average, and then they get the answer. That was a relatively simple one, but how much space does the crown of the tree occupy? This was a nice question. Firstly, they wanted to know what is the crown of the tree? Is it the top of the tree or what? So they did some research. The crown of the tree is its upper section above the trunk, consisting of the branches, the leaves, flowers, and fruits. And they do a representation for you. That's what the real model kind of thing. Space occupied. This is a difficult question all the time. The term space occupied refers conceptually to how much space an object takes up. In many cases, it equals to the solid volume, in many cases. However, it can also include the 2D footprint area, because that's what actually happens when people want to know how much of space do you need for the building. It's not just the physical infrastructure, it's also the other outlets for the plumbing, etc., etc. That's what the question you really ask, and they are ground space, you see. Buffer zones for maintenance of that. But this is where real discussion and argumentation in the group. Is the crown ellipsoidal or conical? What's the best fit? Looking at what they got. The waterbury tree crown generally dome-shaped and broader than is tall, which makes an ellipsoidal approximation ideal. Since the waterbury crowns are round and symmetrical, the ellipsoid model provides a more accurate representation compared to that conical shape. And the crown shape is best modeled as an ellipsoid than a cone. Some others in the group spoke about the cone, the frustum of the cone, you understand? Okay, that would work. But this was not part of my lesson. So collaborative pedagogy refers to an instructional approach where teachers and learners actively work together to construct knowledge through shared dialogue, problem solving, and decision making. It is grounded in social constructivism theories of learning, particularly Vygotsky's notion of knowledge co-constructed through social interaction and mediated experiences. And the key features of that is shared knowledge construction, active student engagement, dialogic teaching, co-teaching and co-learning, and focus on critical thinking and problem solving. And the benefits for mathematics education is it encourages deep conceptual understanding through peer explanations, supports higher order thinking and creativity by exposing students to diverse strategies, fosters self-directed learning and metacognitive regulation, which is very important as students monitor their own progress and growth. Builds collaborative skills essential for 21st century learning workplace environments. I mean, the COVID problems were solved by multi-stakeholder engagements, isn't it? Different people being involved. And some of the practical strategies are group problem solving, peer instruction, collaborative technology, and inquiry circle. Now, going back to this problem, they realized that the volume of ellipsoid is given by that formula, and they define what D1 and D2. D1 and D2 are the longest crown spreads along the two perpendicular directions. So if one is looking at the tree, one is looking at what is the widest length across this way, and what is the widest length across this way when you're looking at the ellipse tree from the bottom, okay? And then the semi-axis of that is determined by taking D1 and dividing by 2 and D2 by dividing 2. And then H is the total height of the tree, which they know right from the beginning, and H is the crown height. What is the crown height, which I showed you earlier? And C is actually found by taking the crown height and dividing by 2. So they actually got all the variables and what they are going to do. And the assumption is assume an ideal geometric shape for the tree crown, ellipse for the 2D footprint, and ellipsoid for the 3D volume estimation. And then the data collection plan is collect the following data, and the model formulation is they have the footprint area formula for ellipse and the ellipsoid formula. So they have the models. And now, if you see that, that's the one spread, which is the purple one, and the other spread is the one that is in orange. So that's the two. That's the D1 and D2. And we divide that, A is D1 over 2, and B is that. And they got the height of the tree, which is 12.79 meters. The height of the trunk from the bottom, which you can see. Subtract that, they got the crown height, which is that. So those are the calculations which they do. And then obviously they substitute in the formula, and they get the volume of the ellipse. And obviously they compare and assume the model crown shape visually. And they also, different groups did different measurements, crown spreads from the multiple orientations, and also alternate models were pursued. So some use the frustum of the cone, and then also some people was teasing me and say they can use the drone. Okay. So the modeling process, I think summarizes what I was talking about, is the real life problem, simplifying, making assumptions, building a real model, mathematizing the situation through generating a whole lot of variables, which I just demonstrated now, and the various kinds of answers that you can get through the mathematical model and the solution that you're going to use and the strategies you're going to use, and then interpreting your answers and making sense of it. Some reflections on the tree project. It was an open-ended, authentic assessment task. It governed by assessment criteria. It promoted mathematical thinking. It ensured collaboratively and brainstorming and deliberation, and it enabled them to incorporate various problem-solving strategies and kinds of mathematics that they would utilize. And the range of models and strategies used to solve the problem was quite varied, and the range of mathematical topics involved was also quite large, and developed the mathematical competencies through meaning and problem solving. So what are my scholarly contributions? One of my scholarly contributions, the project is now over, that was the Syzygium tree. So one of my scholarly contributions is research on geometry and reasoning. Much of my work and my PhD study was done on that. I think one of my important contributions was the principle of generalization advocated by Paul Yar. I demonstrated and showed him that the definition is partially incorrect. Okay? As a senior, this is an example of where I was advancing mathematical modeling as a pedagogical tool, and also demonstrating to you how assessment practices can drive learning. The impact on the body of knowledge. My research outputs includes postgraduate supervision, peer-reviewed publications, book chapters, conference papers, and edited volumes. I have advanced knowledge in mathematical modeling, real world, geometry reasoning, technology-enhanced learning environment, self-directed learning, use of engaging pedagogies that cultivate learners' autonomy through problem-solving and proof-based inquiry. Proof is also one of my other cornerstones, and teacher professional development and curriculum transformation. My impact on practice is about modeling-based curricula embedded in our teacher education programs to foster self-directed and regulated learning and reflective engagement, and also technology-driven proof tasks, encourage learners to experiment independently and deepen understanding. And my leadership in developing the UWC assessment framework sometime before the previous one enabled me to engage rich formative assessment practices. My future direction, my niche is advancing research and innovation in the areas I just mentioned. It's also about strengthening postgraduate research and supervision and leading assessment-driven innovation in terms of how can we now utilize assessment more productively and also to drive student learning and build international leadership and collaboration, which we are currently doing in terms of mathematics education. But I think at the end of all of this, Dr. Samuel Lundy, is a transformational learning approach for mathematics in higher education. What I'm pointing to for us to take home is how we as peers in Mathematics Education Committee, in teacher education as well as school teachers, re-look at what we do. Colleagues, yes, there's lots being done in terms of professional development, lots being done by the department in terms of mathematics support, etc. But it's not enough. 72% of schools don't have functioning libraries and access to proper classrooms. Over 58% of schools don't have internet access, you understand? And so the reality is not so good in terms of mathematics. We have teachers teaching mathematics, but not all of them in all schools are able and qualified to teach mathematics. That's why you find the numbers of students doing mathematics is dwindling, and it's becoming concerning. Here in the Western Cape itself, a number of schools don't offer mathematics in the Western Cape as well. And this province in particular has got the smallest number, one of the smallest numbers of students doing mathematics. More are being pushed to maths, and it's a pattern across the country. So I think we need to look at deep knowledge in teacher education, deep understanding, looking at problematic knowledge, high-order thinking, substantive conversation, and the meta-language. So intellectual quality and the quality of the academic project is fundamentally important. The kind of quality learning environment that we provide is important. You know, this Faculty of Education got a state-of-the-art building, and we do take advantage of it in terms of facilitating meaningful learning. So in that, we're looking at what are the explicit quality criteria. Where are your rubrics? High expectations, high engagement, social support, student direction, student self-direction, self-regulation. And the significance of what we do is what is the knowledge that we bring, what is the background knowledge, what's the knowledge of integration, what's the multidisciplinary nature, what's the cultural knowledge, how we're responding culturally, inclusivity, and obviously connectedness. So the future of mathematics lies in preparing adaptive, creative, and self-directed learners who can navigate an increasingly complex, technology-rich world. Through scholarly leadership, cutting-edge research, mentorship, and global collaboration, I'm committed to shaping the future while positioning UWC at the forefront of innovation in mathematics education. With that, thank you.
Thank you, Professor Govender. That was a very interesting snapshot of your scholarship. Let's give him another hand of applause. Our respondent to the inaugural lecture is the Dean of the Faculty of Natural Sciences, Professor David Holgate.
I meant to call you Prof. Govender, but I hope you don't mind if I call you Raj. I think it's an easier way to address you as I respond to your lecture, so thank you. Your lecture unpacked many things. The topic was rich, gave us a vision for mathematics education, and I certainly enjoyed it. And this connection from the deep roots of learning theory, the branching growth of creativity, criticality, self-directed learning, that in itself is a wonderful metaphor for education, and the pedagogic device of the tree in itself was lovely. And in many ways, your lecture took me back to my own childhood, not just because I had such a tree in my garden, and I confess the mathematics that I applied was more in at what angle must I throw the berries to hit the car that was coming past. I didn't try and measure its height. But more importantly, it took me back to my childhood, because I think I had the good fortune of having a teacher who interacted with us in that way. I still remember him coming into the classroom one time. He'd been rolling up a rope on the sports field on a coil, and he came running into the class very excited, and he said, "How are we going to measure how long the rope can be that fits on this coil?" And then we spent the next day or so trying to work out how long the rope could be to wind up onto a coil like that. And those experiences of my youth are really why I'm a mathematician today. I had a physics teacher who was terrible. And I think I could have gone to either physics or mathematics, but the mathematics teacher inspired me, doing exactly what you were illustrating. And central to Raj's philosophy, as he pointed out, the constructivism, activity theory, problem-based learning, these all emphasize knowledge as co-constructed, socially mediated, and rooted in authentic problems. That came through really strongly in your lecture today. And the 4 academic pillars that you spoke of, the geometry and proof, mathematical modeling, technology-enhanced learning, self-directed learning, and the belief that assessment really helps drive learning. I think those are things that are important for us to reflect on. Now, many of you in the audience, I guess, are education theorists. I'm not an education theorist. And in fact, when I was a precocious new lecturer, I remember we had to go on an orientation course. I was at Stellenbosch University at the time. And at the end, we had to fill in a report on an evaluation of the course. And we'd had somebody from education come and talk to us about lecturing. And I remember I wrote on the piece of paper, education theorists take common sense and write it in inaccessible language. And I always call this my most cited piece of writing on education, because apparently the director of the teaching unit wrote that out and stuck it up on the notice board in their unit to remind them to be accessible to us in what they convey. So these words, if you're not an education theorist, about constructivism might sound opaque, but I think your lecture really, it wasn't full of jargon. It really did bring home these ideas. It really illustrated to us what these mean. And that in itself is an important pedagogical practice. So me as a non-theorist, I'm very grateful for that I could access what you were illustrating, what you were thinking. And your mathematical modeling presented not just a technique, but it was a pedagogical catalyst. And that was lovely to see. So this modeling cycle that you had, understanding, mathematizing, solving, interpreting, validating, that's how we want our students to navigate real-world complexity. And it really does illustrate powerfully how groups can use diverse strategies, your trigonometry, your angles, your shadows, the different methods that people used. They reveal a richness of multiple methods in what we do, and that there's not one way to find an answer. And often it's the route to finding the answer that's more important than the answer in itself. And I think we can all identify with that scenario that your students took, even registrar if you're still looking for X. What you presented to us today was, as I said, something that we could identify with. And that's crucial, both as a pedagogue for yourself, but also, I think, in the development of mathematical thinking. So it highlighted creativity, critical thinking, essential learning outcomes, open-ended tasks, how important those are, and how critical thinking is aligned with higher order reasoning. All these things came out in beautiful ways in your example. Collaboration, collaborative pedagogies, shared problem solving, and how you can reduce maths anxiety, I think, by including people in that sort of environment. And we live in a period where the importance of STEM is constantly put forward. We almost take it for granted that we don't even question STEM is important. I think sometimes we should. I do, obviously, myself, as a Dean of Science, believe STEM is important. But too often, maybe we just accept it. And what your lecture illustrated was why. Why is it important? What are the processes that we go through? What do we learn? What constructs evolve in our thinking if we engage in these sorts of activities? And this is really only valid, though, if we're taught by people who can guide us through such processes. And that was also what you illustrated. So, Raj, your scholarly contributions go way beyond. You told us a little bit at the end. Curriculum innovation, assessment reform, professional development. But the clear vision of your lecture was maths education must prepare learners to be adaptive, to be creative, self-directed, and equipped for a technology-rich world. And you really underscored modeling as both a bridge between theory and practice, but also a transformative tool for cultivating autonomy, thinking creatively, and critical engagement. So, at a risk of repeating myself, you really brought home for me the truth of mathematical modeling, not just as a tool for problem solving, but because of its transformative pedagogy, rooted in your constructivist theory and your authentic assessment, and that really fosters what we're after. Why are we wanting people to learn STEM? It fosters creativity, criticality, collaboration, self-directed learning. And the TREE project is a lovely example. It just embodies this philosophy, grounds abstract mathematics in a lived real-world investigation. So thank you, Raj. And most importantly, I hope that you can develop more and more teachers who are going to teach our young people to approach mathematics, which is often seen as inaccessible, in a way that really brings it home to them and does what we say teaching of mathematics should do, changes the way they think. So thank you very much. Well done on your lecture. And from my side, I really enjoyed it, and I learned a lot. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Holgate. I now call upon the registrar to hand over a gift to Professor Govender on behalf of the university. I'm not sure if there's any money in there. We've come almost to the end of the program. I call upon my colleague, Dr. Karen Collette, the coordinator of the Business Management Education Cluster in the Faculty of Education, to pass the vote of thanks.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me great pleasure to end with a vote of thanks. It's going to take a few minutes, and I'd like to start with thanking Madam Registrar, Dr. Lawson-Misra, and the Faculty and University Executive for being here. And then I'd like to thank deeply Prof. Rajendran Govender for an inspirational inaugural address. I think as Faculty of Education members, you've really modeled for us in your presentation your contribution to your disciplinary field, and as well as your contribution to the field of teaching, learning, and assessment and pedagogy in higher education, and what it means for the development of 21st and 22nd century competencies in our learners. And then more at a personal level, I must just say that I will never look at a waterberry tree again in the same way. And I'm very, very concerned because I've actually planted one outside my house. And I wish that I'd heard this lecture a number of years ago, because then I would have thought of calculating exactly how big it's going to be, because I'm very worried it's going to block my sunshine out. So Prof, thank you very, very much. And I think it models the way for us as faculty staff in terms of looking at the constructive alignment between teaching, learning, and assessment. And you've really elaborated on that, but also the deep pedagogical knowledge that underpins and nourishes the roots of the tree around our teaching, learning, and assessment theories and our disciplinary knowledge. So thank you for that, and thank you for charting the way forward for us. So on that note, ladies and gentlemen, I'd also like to really thank Prof. Govender's wife and his 2 children for being here, and all Prof. Govender's friends and students that are sitting in the audience that have come to support him, for being here to celebrate him on this very important day. So an event like this wouldn't be possible if there weren't people that were prepared to respond to inaugural addresses. So Prof. Holgate, the Dean of Science, I'd like to thank you for being an excellent respondent. I think you've very captured Prof. Govender's contribution and I suppose the message he sends out to all of us and to the future of mathematics educators in the country and what we need. So thank you very, very much for being here. Thanks also to Prof. Rajendran Chetty as the convener of this inaugural lecture, for holding us all together and for directing procedures. Thank you very much. And then to all the members of the Faculty of Education and to the 2 Deputy Deans, Prof. Lekay and Prof. Marman, for being here, and to all my faculty colleagues that are here tonight, and to all our students and to all the administrative staff that are here, and maybe a specific, very important thank you to Ms. Bierwinkel and the administrative staff for putting together this event today. It's been very professionally done. Thank you very much. Maybe we can give them a special round of applause. Then I'd like to thank Mr. Hardy Zacharias. He's the events coordinator. He always makes sure that we're profiling UWC very well. And thank you, Hardy. Where are you? There. Maybe we can also give Hardy a word of thanks. And then to our AVS colleagues, Mr. Gino Alfred and his colleagues, you'll see that we're actually live streaming. So there are other people watching this. I'm not sure how many thousands are watching this, but if we can thank Gino and his colleagues as well. Thank you. Then finally, I'd like to thank all of you for being here tonight. So an event like this wouldn't be possible if you weren't all here to celebrate Prof. Govender. And we would like to invite all of you to partake in refreshments after this ceremony. So when we conclude, I'm going to ask that we're going to have the procession that's going to leave first. And we're going to begin from, I think, Dr. Lawson, are you going to lead the procession? Then we're going to have the academic staff file out, and then we're going to ask all of you to come behind us. So the reception's up on the floor above, and thank you once again. I'd like to end off with a final hand clap for Prof. Govender. Well done, Prof.
Thank you, Dr. Colette. May I please request you to stand while the procession leaves?